I'm Ellery Kanian. I'm essentially manager of EDI support, to keep my title simple, at True Value Company. I've been in this business for over 4 years, and I've been with True Value for 15. I've been on the periphery of EDI most of my career, supporting applications that had to feed EDI. But about 2.5 years ago, I was handed EDI support. And so I had to take a very quick, I had a team of one who had to have a very quick learning curve with the EDI support guy who was leaving the company. And we had to learn how to support Gentran at the time. A little bit about True Value. We're a global hardware cooperative. We've got over 4,400 member retailers. Being a cooperative, the members own us. We do not own the stores. So that's a very unique situation in the distribution marketplace. We can't tell the stores what to do. We have to cajole them when we want them to do something and make it worth their while. We've got about $2 billion in annual revenue, 13 regional distribution centers, 2 domestic consolidation centers, 2 consolidation centers in China, and about 2,500 employees. So where did we start with EDI? We started out with Gentran Basic version 6.3 running on the IBM mainframe in a batch environment. So we had users. Our users did all the maintaining of trading partners. They would onboard trading vendors mostly with 850s, 856s, 860s, and 810s, and so they would monitor. They would test with the vendors to make sure that the specs were correct. And the data they were sending was okay, and they would monitor 987 activity acknowledgments to make sure that that was done very well. The volume was about 100 trading partners annually that we would have to onboard. We were doing FTP communication with our VAN, which was IBM. We had 62 maps. We had 4 non-standard files that we traded with banks that were not translated. So they weren't EDI, but they were, the banks communicated through the VAN to us. So it landed in it landed on the EDI side to retrieve that information and pass it on to the applications. In fact, one of our outbound maps, the data from the application came. And we wrapped the EDI wrappers around it and then sent it on to the VAN, so the VAN knew where to ship it off to. But the data inside was not ANSI X12 standard data. So we had over 4,000 trading partners on file. We found out as of about a week ago, we had activity since October of about 1,982 of those partners. So the users didn't do a lot of cleanup over the years. We do about 1.7 million kilocharacters a month, 5,400 documents a month, which amounts to about 8,000 to 10,000 transactions a day. And as I mentioned before, True Value associates had minimal experience with Gentran at the time. So why are we migrating off the mainframe, and why did we do the project in the first place? We wanted to update our technology in general. That was one of the reasons. We were using a lot of old, but COBOL, DB2 CICS, a lot of applications that were mainframe based. We were writing a lot of .NET interfaces to some of those old applications, so we wanted to get everything off. And cost reduction. We estimated that by getting off the mainframe, we'd save $1.6 million a year. I know IBM doesn't want to hear this, but that's the way it is. So we needed to update the old Gentran EDI platform because it wasn't very versatile and didn't give us a lot of flexibility to do much with it. And it didn't give us the ability to improve EDI functionality either, which was another one of the reasons. And we wanted to further simplify the user support because the user support group actually got downsized recently, and so this is going to be a benefit to them. The target environment for the new software was Wintel servers running Microsoft Windows operating systems. We started out considering managed services. We looked into that, but because of the large number of vendors, we couldn't cost justify managed services. So we started looking at other companies, and these are just a smattering of the companies we looked at. We looked at some of these offered managed services and software. So we looked at both all of the offerings that they had. So we also involved users in evaluating the software so that they could judge the interfaces, because they're the ones who are going to use the interfaces more than anybody else. So in looking at all of these software offerings, most of them were strictly EDI-centric. So they didn't offer a lot of functionality outside of the EDI arena. And IBM B2B Integrator ended up being the most versatile piece of software we found. Some of the benefits we saw, it handles all the communication in addition to EDI. We can maintain a detailed transaction history with it, whereas with Gentran we were stuck with keeping GDGs, on the mainframe that would go back, maybe a month or so, but beyond that we just didn't have the capacity to keep all those files. It gave us end-to-end visibility of all the communication transactions and processes that we had. So we knew within B2B if we got it from the van and delivered it to the application and vice versa, okay? It gave us guaranteed delivery. So if something wasn't delivered, which can happen, we knew that it wasn't delivered, and we would get emails sent to us to tell us that it wasn't delivered. But for the most part, the software handles everything in that area. It's fully configurable using the built-in business process management software and the objects that come out of the box. One of the things that comes out of the box is pretty much all your communication protocols. It allows us to resend documents or rerun processes that fail. So if for some reason a document, a transaction didn't make it, or the vendor said he didn't get it, the user can go in and resend it to him. In the old, with Gentran, that didn't happen at all. I mean, we just couldn't do that. We didn't have the ability to do that. It has email functionality. Now this is great because now we can automate some of the errors coming out of the translator and send them to the vendor without a human being getting involved to see what's wrong. And with Gentran, there was a report of non-compliant transactions. The users would have to pour through that report every day and then pick up the phone, call the vendor to say, hey, you got a problem with this 856 you sent us. It didn't come in because of whatever reason. Now we can automate that, and the user doesn't have to get involved at all. And the mapping tool is very versatile and much easier to use than than Gentran's mapper, which was 3270 based, green screen. So we then were looking for help in getting this going. IBM put us in contact with Remedy, and I had a colleague who joined the company who had previously worked with C-Level Solutions. Remedy, we interviewed their tech guy, and we immediately saw that he knew what he was doing and was very capable. And the other thing that happened was that we found out that Remedy has a framework that comes along with the software if you hire them to use their services. And the framework was an incredible thing, because we talked to C-Level, and we showed C-Level the framework, and we asked them, what would you charge us to build that? And it became very obvious that that wasn't the way to go. And you'll see a little bit of the framework later on. So C-Level, so we used Remedy to do most of the work, and C-Level Solutions offered us a fixed contract on the map conversions. So we hired them to do that. This was the architecture. This architecture was recommended by Remedy. Now in conjunction with this project, we were also setting up SI as an enterprise service bus. We are using SI to communicate with a lot of our member stores doing rewards, True Value Rewards, our rewards card, and collecting point of sale data. That project is ongoing, and so what was put together, if we start at the bottom, you can see on the right there's an EDI instance of SI, and then we have the enterprise service bus instance of SI with 2 nodes. Now we separated this so that the EDI activity wouldn't interfere with what was going on with the bus. All right. The two instances, and they're on separate servers, virtual servers. The 2 instances are connected by MQ. All right. Then when it comes to talking inbound coming in from the outside world, either the van or the internet, we have a load balancer that was provided and configured by Radware, and 4 perimeter servers to balance the traffic going into those nodes. All right. So Radware handles the traffic to make sure that none of the servers gets overburdened with volume. Okay. At the bottom here, both instances have a database. The SI instance has visibility to the bus database, because data coming in from SI is going to pass through the bus and then go to EDI, and we wanted our users to be able to see total end-to-end communication and the status of a transaction all the way through. So we programmed the EDI side to look at the service bus in order to see all that information. So let's take a look a little at the project plan. This was our original project plan. So we had about True Value, spent about a week building the servers and the databases, because that was just infrastructure work. Prior to this, all this starting, my associate started collecting test data from Gentran to test the map conversions, and that isn't here. because he did that before we started the project. Remedy installed the SI software. That took a couple of days. We had to install and configure the load balancing software. That was scheduled to take a week. Loading the trading partners into SI was done by Remedy. That took about 2 weeks. Collecting the data for map testing from Gentran. That took about 2 weeks. To convert and unit test the map, C-level solution gave us an 8-week estimate on their fixed bid. Configuring all the SI EDI processes took Remedy a couple of weeks. We then workflow tested all the maps when they were completed. So the maps in SI, the map editor is client-based. So it sits on your PC. So you can sit there, and when you test the map, it's going to go up to the server to complete the test. But we also, so when the mappers were doing their work, they tested the maps through the map editor, but then we wanted to test the maps going through all the processes as well. So that was what that was. That took about an extra 2 weeks. We planned, the van told us they needed a week lead time to set up the AS2 mailbox. All of the communication with SI through the van is done with AS2, which is real time. Okay. We then thought it would take 4 weeks for us to do a parallel. We were totally wrong with that. We'll talk about that a little later. User training, Remedy provided about 5 days in their estimate to do user training, but by the time we got to the point where we needed to train the users, I knew enough about how to handle the framework that I was able to train the users myself. So we never really sat down with Remedy in a classroom style to train, because as we were going through the project and doing all the testing, we were learning how the framework worked and learning how to use the software. And then we planned a phased migration that would take about 4 weeks. Okay, a couple of things that were a problem. Load balancer. We estimated a week. We had a problem, it didn't work right. The associate who was working with the true value associate working with Radware left the company. We were trying to get Radware back in to get the software working right. So we sat for about a month waiting for something to happen. At which time, and I kept going back to management to say, can we get the parallel going without having the software, you know, the load balancer done. And they kept saying, no, we want load balancing to be part of the parallel. And after 4 weeks, they said, enough, we don't have enough time. So we started the parallel without the load balancing done. And in retrospect, it never needed to be part of the parallel, because, you know, I didn't care about paralleling the load balancer. That was software that testing was done in about a week's time after we got into the parallel and they got everything up. The other issue was the 4 weeks we estimated for the parallel. Couple of things. When outbound transaction, the way the parallel was done, and I have another slide for that. Let me talk about that when I get to that slide. That'll be better. It'll be easier for you to understand. So the map conversion. We use the map export from Gentran, okay? But we found out that Gentran, the map export, didn't create all the mapping logic. All it generated was record layouts, okay? So we had to use the 2 map reports that come out of Gentran. One report is driven from the EDI side, and the other report is driven from the application record side. And that report had all the mapping logic. So the mapper used that report to replicate the Gentran map logic when he built the maps. So we did all that manually from the reports. And one of the things we found out was that Gentran is much less forgiving than SI is. In Gentran, if you're not using a segment that's part of your spec, and the segment comes in from the partner, Gentran assumes that you don't want to use it, and it doesn't reject the transaction, it just ignores it. In SI, if the segment isn't in your map, SI assumes that you don't want to receive that segment, and if you get it from the partner, he rejects the transaction. So, in retrospect, what we should have done on inbound maps, we should have used the record layout, the application record layout, and taken the entire spec from the spec library and used that as the input layout, and then done the mapping from there. Because then any segment that wasn't being used would still be in the spec, and if we got it from the partner, we wouldn't reject the transaction. So we had a lot of testing issues that were related to that problem. We did a detailed analysis of the Gentran partner report. The Gentran partner report was very thorough. It listed every partner and every transaction that we traded with that partner, all right? I spent a lot of time looking at our maps, looking at maps that didn't make sense. We had maps that were specific to like one vendor. Our standard, and we enforced this with this project, our standard has always been that the partners use our specs. Okay, we do not have a special any custom specs with any specific partner. There, of course, is one exception to that, and that's UPS, because they're the 800-pound gorilla, and when it comes to 210s, which are freight invoices, they give us the spec, and they're the only partner that we do that with. So I was able to reduce, to eliminate 41 maps that weren't used. So we ended up with 21 maps altogether. The partner profile conversion used two files from Gentran, the partner.par and the cross-reference.crf file. We looked through all the documentation and actually had to make a call to IBM to get the record layouts for those files. But once we had the record layouts, Remedy was very well able to create the profiles and do the conversion. So Remedy ended up loading data into database tables. That was what their endpoint was. But before they did that, they exported the data into a spreadsheet template. This template was then reviewed by the users and myself to make sure all the partners were set up right. We ended up finding a lot of duplicates in that process, which we had to resolve manually. We had over 100 rows on the map that were duplicates, so we had to go through that and eliminate the duplicates. So when we imported it, when we were finally done and imported it into SI, we ended up creating over 15,000 profiles. So when we were ready to start the production parallel, this is what we did. We took the application file that was sent from SI, from the mainframe, and we sent that file to SI. The presence of the file triggered the process in SI to process the file. And in the end, instead of sending that file to the van, we put it in we collected it in a file in SI, okay? And this was managed with profiles. So the file arrived on SI, triggers the translation process, we saved the output. The SI translated output was saved in the file, it wasn't sent to the van. And then we also saved the Gentran file that came out, and then we compared them, okay? Outbound was very easy because outbound is batch. So when we do outbound, for instance, we send 850s only 3 or 4 times a day. So the files going into SI and coming into Gentran were in the same sequence, so it was very easy to compare them. So we compared them. When we found issues, we noted the errors. We sent that back to the mappers to fix the errors. So that went very smoothly and was very easy to do. On the inbound side, SI on the inbound side translated the application files and saved them in SI by partner and document type. Okay. The Gentran application files were saved on the mainframe, but since SI is real time and Gentran is batch, the files were not in the same sequence. So in order to do the comparison, we had to grab an SI file and go look for the same file, the same transaction in the Gentran output file, and then isolate that to do the compares. Now we did the compares on the PC using Notepad++ or WinMerge. So that was a lot more time consuming, which also contributed to the lengthier parallel time. When we were all done with the inbound file, we tested the file with the application just to make sure that we didn't find anything that we missed doing the compares that the application would have found when we ran it. So the phase migration, we did it by document type. And so what we did outbound, we turned off all the FTPs to SI. We turned them off by document type when the parallel was completed. To turn them on, we just simply had to change the communication destination that we used in the parallel to send it to the van. So those were simple profile changes. We did that one doc type at a time. We started out in most cases with the smallest volume and worked our way up to the larger volume. So the last documents we did, I think, were 850s going outbound. Inbound, we installed a mainframe job to process the SI file. So inbound, SI is the boss and has the schedule. So since everything inbound is coming in real time, SI saves all the data in the queue, and then at whatever times we specified in the schedule, it gathers that information and sends it to the mainframe, FTPs it to the mainframe in a file. Okay. That file triggers the mainframe job. All right, we use CI7. So the presence of the file triggers the mainframe job. In the mainframe job, we then copied that file to the file that Gentran used to deliver, because the mainframe JCL, the application was already using that file name. So we copied it and we deleted the file so that it would be ready for the next time we sent data up. So again, to do inbound by map, We disabled the communication profile used for the parallel and enabled it to the profile to send it to the mainframe. And we did have some application files, a couple of transactions that were scheduled rather than triggered, because the users wanted to make sure that that their jobs ran at the same time every day, rather than, they just didn't trust SI. So we accommodated that. The partner load. Now, the users, we're talking about improvements here. Those of you who know, can I see show of hands? Just so I'm curious, how many of you are seriously considering migration off your current EDI platform to SI? Great. All right, how many of you here have done it but are just coming here to keep score? More. Hey, well, that's interesting. Okay. Well, here, one of the improvements, if you know how Gentran works, you've got all those green screens, and setting up a partner, you have to understand every screen and you know how to do this. I'll tell you, in the short time that I was working with Gentran, I never figured it out. I'm glad the users knew how to do it. We made it very easy in SI. So what we have, we load a new partner from a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet, and I'm only showing you a snippet here of the spreadsheet. I hid some of the columns. We've set these up for the transactions that the users essentially use most of the time, which, if you look over to the right in the yellow, we've got 856s, 850s, 810s, and 860s. Now, I put the 860s last in the list because not every vendor trades 860s, so, you know, they would frequently set up vendors with 856s, 850s, and 810s. And then we have other vendors that we only trade 810s with, okay? So the users simply fill in the columns in white for the new vendor, okay? They don't touch the columns highlighted in yellow. They then save the spreadsheet as a CSV, and they go to a remedy framework portal for loading, and there's a function for loading the partner, loading the spreadsheet. They simply identify what they're doing, that it's an EDI X12 partner. They browse to where the spreadsheet is. They click a button. It's loaded. They immediately get a report telling them that it was successful, or if it failed, it would tell them what was wrong. So it took a little while for the users to get the idea of this, but now it's very fast. It's cut a lot of time off of what they do. So that's loading trading partners. This is the Remedy Framework search portal, and this is really one of the greatest things for the users, especially, and for us. All of these fields you see on here are filters that can be used in any combination you want to search for transactions. Now, we're keeping 2 years of EDI transactions. Prior to this, we were lucky to have a month or two. And what's really great is if you look at the bottom where it says data search, now if a vendor calls and said, you know, did you send me that purchase order? They can go in, put in the purchase order number, and it'll immediately tell them if it finds it or if it doesn't find it. And they can tell the vendor, yeah, we sent this to you yesterday at 10 o'clock at night, or 3 weeks ago, whenever. So this is a great help. If you look at the tabs at the top, the administration console comes out of the box. That's SI. The rest of the tabs are the Remedy framework. Configuration we use a lot, that's where the profiles are. Load, the load tab is where we load trading partners. If you want to see the framework, come to the Remedy booth, and we'll be glad to show you how the framework works. Another improvement was an overdue acknowledgement report. Gentran doesn't create an overdue acknowledgement report. The users had to go through the reports of the positive acknowledgments, looking for acknowledgments that may not have gotten sent. Of course, that was very time consuming. Now every morning they get a report of overdue acknowledgments. The profile lets you identify how long you want to wait before you consider the acknowledgement overdue. This saves tons of time for the users. Now, because we have in our portal, because we have, if I go just a comment back to the search screen, because we have 2 instances of SI, we can sometimes, when we do a search, we'll get 2 records for each transaction, because there's a record that identifies, for instance, on inbound, there's a record identifying that the data was delivered from the van through the bus to EDI, and then another record that shows the data going from the EDI instance to the mainframe. Okay. So some of the challenges we had. We originally, there's an interesting story here, I have a little time. I was working on, back in 2012, or 13, I can't remember which. I was working on a project on the team that was estimating the cost of getting off the mainframe. Now, at the time, when I started doing that project, EDI didn't report to me. So we were doing all these estimates, and then we were about a week away from having to deliver the results. And 2 weeks before then, I was assigned SI. So then I said, is there an estimate for SI in here? And I was told, no, there's no estimate for SI. Oh. So I had to scramble. So what did I do? I called IBM, and I don't know. All I know is Gentran. At the time, I had no idea that B2B Integrator existed. So I went to IBM and I said, do you have a version of Gentran that runs on a Windows box? They said, yes. I said, how much does it cost? They told me. I said, are there tools that make it easy to do the conversion? They said, oh, sure. Okay. So I put a very small amount of money in the budget to handle labor from our side, and so when we went to do this and we saw the price tag for B2B Integrator, it was one of those oh shucks moments. Where's the money going to come from? Well, we were saved by the other project, because what happened was the other project that needed the bus, the fellow who came was recently hired at the time to do that project. Had used B2B Integrator at another company, and he used it as a bus, and it was his intention to bring it here as a bus. So between their budget and the little bit of budget I had for EDI, we were able to pay for everything. And we were still over because we needed 2 instances when we were all done. But we were able to sell it to management, and the benefits were definitely there. I already talked about the load balancing software configuration. That was a problem. And the parallel was underestimated. We found that out. Part of it was due to the difficulty in doing the inbound compares. We didn't realize when we put the estimate together that the inbound data wasn't going to be sequenced the same way that the data coming from Gentran was. We didn't realize that was going to take time. The other thing we didn't realize was that it just, with 2,000 partners, there's a lot of variation in the data you receive. And now some of you were probably thinking, well, why didn't we just create a test for the map that had everything in it that we would need to accept a transaction? Well, there's a lot of variation. A lot of these maps are complicated, especially the A10, for example. Part of the problem was we didn't really have anyone who knew, since we were new to EDI, we didn't have anyone who knew enough to actually create offline test data that would have tested every feature of the map to begin with. So the easiest thing was to just collect samples of live data to do the testing with. And of course, we missed stuff. So that extended the period. And then we had issues with, for instance, we get, the 210 took a long time because UPS only sends us invoices once a week. So, you get an invoice, you get a batch from them, you find an error, the mapper has a problem, the mapper goes and corrects the error, and now you gotta wait a week to get another set of data, even though he sent that through, okay, and that data, the error data went through cleanly. Now I gotta wait for another set and to make sure that goes through, because our goal was to get at least one or two transaction batches from a partner that came through clean before we said that we're done, okay, with that map. So that took a while. And then we had some issues with that you can sometimes have with a fixed bid, with availability of people who, anyway. So that all added to the time. So at some point, I believe in late July, early August, we added another resource. And I didn't realize I had a guy on my team who was actually working with our warehouse management system, and he had worked with Gentran in a previous life. And he never told me that he had done this. I had no idea he had done this, but he was a great help because he knew Gentran better than my guy knew Gentran. And he was able to give us a lot of help with that. Lessons we learned. I said this before, SI is not as forgiving as Gentran, so you have to be very careful when you do your maps. And I also mentioned this, for inbound only, use the Gentran exported map for the application record only. Pull the full X12 layout from the standard when you do the map conversion. I talked about the inbound compares being more difficult than we anticipated. Don't underestimate the time for the parallel. And don't forget to turn on the 9970s. We had everything going, and vendors started to ask, did you acknowledge that transaction? Oh, what's wrong? And so I called Remedy, and they said, well, did you activate the profile for the outbound 997s? I said, oh, okay. No, I didn't. So that was an easy fix.